Hey, welcome to another episode of Ag News. I'm Patrick Dengel, filling in for Dwayne Rigsby. And today we have a special guest, Brian Raison. He's going to be talking about preparing or planning for strategic planning. I think you'll find it very interesting, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Ag News. I'm Patrick Dengel, filling in for Dwayne Rigsby, and our special guest today is Brian Raison. Brian works with the Ohio State University, the Community Development Program. And Brian, before we talk about some of the things that you brought, tell the viewing audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Patrick. So I'm an extension guy, 23, 24 years, something like that, here at Ohio State. And everyone, or a lot of people know extension anyway, that we work in every county around the state. And my area, I've done 4-H actually for a few years, but my main area over these 20 plus years has been in community development. And so that's my specialization and where my expertise is. I also teach a little bit on campus. I'm a associate professor. I teach in the College of Food, Ag, Environmental Science, and Agriculture, Communications, Education, and Leadership program. So mostly graduate courses. And today, some of the things I'm going to talk about today are actually extracted from a graduate course where I'm teaching our students how to do strategic planning. I think it'll be pretty applicable to anybody who's working in a nonprofit, a business, or even just planning it could be your farm things, but strategically planning and thinking about the future and how you can get there.
Now, you have mentioned that you're with the community development. What does community development mean? What's that all about?
It's pretty broad. So community development, wow, we touch on a lot of things. A lot of the work that we're doing is in capacity building for organizations. It could be for small nonprofits or large governmental agencies. It could be for private industry, business, and also for individuals. We're trying to build that capacity and help people understand how they can better their community, how they can improve their community, and reach the goals and dreams and aspirations that they may have.
So why is the different organizations, the different groups that you work with, why do they need planning strategies?
That's a great question, and a lot of people don't actually even think about that. And so that's the reason today I came up with this idea of planning for strategic planning. I get lots of calls from people saying, well, we need a strategic plan, and it's usually because their boss said, you need a strategic plan. But smart organizations or even individuals, when they think about, do they really want to reach their mission? Do they want to serve their customers better? Do they want to increase their bottom line, their profits? They pause and they think, we need to plan for the future. And so, but they don't always know where to start. So hence this idea of why strategic planning matters, or planning for strategic planning. I started thinking that through and just drawing on, I've done dozens and dozens of strategic plans with organizations all across the state and other places as well. And so I kind of put this little idea together of getting them started with thinking about that strategic planning.
A quick question. You know, when I work with small businesses, we do a business plan process, and that includes some of those elements of strategic plan. Something that I've noticed, successful businesses don't write a plan and then put it on the shelf. And I would venture to say the same thing goes with the strategic planning, that this is a living, working document that you need to continually update, maybe?
Absolutely. So traditionally, so many people, they hear the word strategic planning and they just back up. They're like, oh, not again, because that's the old method. Let's do this work. Let's invest this time. Let's go on a retreat. Let's take 2 days out of our work, so we're limiting production. And then we're going to write all this up and pay an outside consultant, even worse, thousands of dollars, and we're going to set it on the shelf and not look at it again.
Yep.
And so I don't in any way advocate for that or even work that way. When I work or help organizations think through a strategic plan, I get very specific and it's very brief. So the planning document that we create while going through the process that I'll outline just very briefly today becomes a usable day in and day out guide for decision making. So it's absolutely not something that sits on a shelf, and it will also include metrics so that you can really look and see, are we moving in the direction we want to be moving? Are we moving closer to our mission, serving our customers better, whatever that may be, return on total capital, increasing the bottom line, so to speak.
Well, that's interesting. So how do you get started with your planning?
Well, let's jump in. So I've got some slides, and we'll share those, probably fade in and out as we talk. Okay. But again, so I get calls from people on a pretty regular basis. And, Brian, we need a strategic plan, yada, yada, yada. And frequently, even the heads of pretty good-sized nonprofits. I mean, I work with some statewide groups. I work with departments on campus. I've worked with departments in other colleges at Ohio State. And a lot of times they have been told they need to have a strategic plan. But the first thing I'll ask an organization is how are things going? Or I'll ask the director or the chair of the department or the president of the nonprofit, how are things going? How's your culture? And usually they're kind of like, what? What are you asking me about that for? I'm asking if you can help us do a strategic plan. And then and I'll share some of these questions here in just a minute and kind of get back to our slideshow here. But then they start to realize that there's a lot more to it than just putting together words on a paper. So let's jump in. Here's one of the first things that I'll do. It's just kind of a fun exercise. I'll say, hey, pretend you're going on a road trip. And I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to think about or write down what you're going to take with you. Go. And frequently, I just actually did this yesterday with a group. So I gave them a half a minute, and I started to say, what do you have on your list? And they were like, oh, my cell phone, cash, a friend, food, all these things. And somebody said, a map. I said, why did you have a map? They said, so we'll know where we're going or how to get where we're going. And I said, well, hold on a second. I didn't tell you where you were going. I just said you were going on a road trip. And so what does that trigger? That triggers the idea that if you're going to the state fair, taking your family, or is very different than if you're leading students on an overseas education experience or mission trip or something. Very different packing list. But the point is, if you don't know where you're going, how do you know what to pack, what to do, what steps to take to get there? And so with strategic planning, you absolutely have to think about where you're going in advance of jumping in to this process. And so that's the critical thing. So it's just kind of a fun question to get you thinking before you jump in. And that's a great question to ask anybody who's thinking about doing strategic planning is, where are you going? And use that little exercise. So why does strategic planning matter? Do we really need to invest a lot of time visioning and planning? And because, again, people have this sort of bad taste in their mouth because for so many years we've done, I'm going to say, a poor job of strategic planning. If we let an organization go through and develop a strategic plan and put it on a shelf, then we've not done our job, because that plan should be dynamic and useful, as you said, Patrick, at the beginning. And it should be a roadmap. Here's an example. 4-H Camp Graham. Love these guys. I was a 4-H educator for 4 or 5 years, and bookings had dropped. They only had about 3 weeks of bookings the entire summer. The financial situation was really terrible. We almost voted to close the camp and to sell the assets. But instead, we undertook a strategic planning process. We got people on board. We realigned and went back to our mission. We got the energy flowing again, and we were able to completely turn that place around. Just last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, we put in a new pool, which was, I don't know, $100,000 or more. And so, and the summers are booked completely. We have a full-time manager. It is night and day difference. And it happened when we did a strategic planning process.
Brian, let me ask you a question on that. I would imagine that individuals are thinking to yourself, well, we'll put in a strategic planning. Next thing you know, we'll have a $100,000 pool. Doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. No. No. That's a great question. So my next example, how did the Troy wreck? So in Troy, Ohio, they had a failing recreation center that served really lower income, lower resource kids. They had not even a dozen young people were coming after school every day. They were about to close the place down as well. The board president came to me and said, can we try to plan and do some strategies and try to get this thing turned around? I said, sure. So we went through a process, and again, like I'll kind of outline here in just a few minutes, and got people on board. We then were able to take that plan to the local United Way and other grant agencies, and when they saw that that board had gotten really serious and had invested a lot of time in thinking about their mission, their goals, who they're serving, and how they could better help these young people, the grants started coming, and they ended up funded at over $300,000. What happens is when funding agencies see that you're serious, or if your customers, if you're in business, start to see that you're serious and you're really working toward your mission and making a difference, particularly with a youth serving agency or something like that, funding becomes available because they see that you have thought it through and you've planned it out, and that money's not just going to go down a rabbit hole and they're going to end up closing the camp anyway, or the building, or whatever it is.
I would imagine, Brian, that also the people the internal staff, the individuals that work there, if they are having, let's say there's 30 individuals, they have 30 different voices out there, it becomes very difficult to know what your game plan is.
Oh,
and with the
absolutely.
strategic planning, what does it do? It helps those staff people be more concerted.
Yeah, brings them together. I actually have shifted my language, and instead of talking about strategic planning all the time, I really talk more about strategic alignment.
Oh.
And I hadn't brought that up yet,
okay.
But you just you're ahead of me, Patrick. So absolutely, we talk about alignment as much as we do planning, and actually changing that. The wording, I think, helps some people engage better, particularly those who have seen all this work done and then it gets set on a shelf and nobody looks at it again.
Right.
A couple more quick examples. Miami County, Ohio, they have a food council that had this idea of doing a farm-to-table dinner with the locavore, the local foods movement, using all Miami County crops and meats, and proteins, and vegetables, and but they didn't know how to really put it together and pull it off. So we went through a strategic planning process, and we got really missional on what mattered, and we were able to put together a really strong plan and divide up the duties and to have the action items spelled out. So we were able to accomplish this amazing thing. And actually, this has been going on now for 5 or 6 years. It wasn't a one-time thing. And that council has continued with the work that they're doing and are making an impact in the county. It's really cool to see success. So all of these groups that I've mentioned have planned strategically for the future. They undertook formal processes so that they could move forward. But back at the beginning, I mentioned planning for strategic planning. You don't just jump into this. You've got to start. And so that's where I had started to jump ahead of myself earlier. When I start to ask questions, when people say they need a strategic plan, what do you need to do? Well, here we go. in general, how are things going? That's the first question I ask them, and they're like, okay, I guess. And I'm like, no, tell me about the culture. Are people in your organization aligned? You gave the example, perfect, Patrick. 30 people, different ideas, going different directions. Everybody's not always on the same page. As I talk with people, with the presidents of boards or chairs of departments at Ohio State, and we start having this digging into the conversation, what I start to hear is, oh, yeah, I guess we kind of do need more alignment or even teamwork, but they don't want to use that word because then people think, oh, we're going to do teamwork training, it couldn't get any worse. And again, that's because they've had a bad experience or nothing came of it. And
I think that's the key that you're talking about. Nothing comes of it. Since we have a number of different organizations that we cater to with grants and things of that nature, we are a part of their process too.
Yeah.
And how many times have we been involved in strategic planning for this group or that group, and that was the last we've seen.
So it's got to continue.
Yes.
And that's in the structure of how you structure that plan, as to whether or not they continue and it goes on. I'll push people back, particularly groups that aren't aligned. If I start to hear that from the CEO or the president of the board or the chair of the department, I'll ask them, can your folks recite their mission? And a lot of times I get a very quiet response. Do they have a cogent elevator pitch, short and sweet? Would everybody give about the same pitch? In other words, is everyone aligned and that they know what the mission is, why they get out of bed in the morning? I often talk about Simon Sinek and his Start With Why, famous TED Talk now, millions of viewers, 40 million or so. It's really remarkable. And his subsequent book. When you drive people back to look at the mission of why they do what they do, people remember what they have almost forgotten because those daily activities get so busy and get in the way of that missional work. But when you go back to the mission, you remember and you can start to prioritize. So that is that's the basis of the entire process to get things started. From there, I get a little more specific. I start to say, well, what are your objectives? What do you really want to happen as a result of this strategic plan? Is this just for compliance because your boss requires it, or your funding agency requires it, because that's certainly been the case? Or do you want something that's iterative and fluid and will actually lead to actionable items that will strengthen your organization, improve your bottom line, serve your customers better, build your team, strengthen the alignment of the folks on your team? Do you need to improve that collegiality where people are working better together because they're, again, aligned in their thinking and their daily task and really helping each other out versus perhaps even working against each other? I've seen that in organizations. Do you need mentoring in your organization? Most of us do at some level. I have mentors, and I teach mentoring also in one of my grad classes, because that's a piece of professional development which goes right along with a strategic planning and a better organization, a more dynamic organization. I'll also ask, are you trying to equip your participants to become better communicators or partners, to expand that vision or focus, the diversity of the organization? We know that more diverse interactions lead to better products and better outcomes because those ideas that come in enrich us and we can improve our process, we can improve our product, whatever that may be, whether that's a camp or recreation activities, or it could be something that we're manufacturing even. I was in private industry manufacturing before, and we certainly did this type of work as well back then. So those clarification of those bottom line objectives is a really critical piece.
So let's suppose you have an organization. I don't know what the ideal number of people that really affects, but let's just suppose we have 30, 40 individuals.
Sure.
Who are in a variety of different areas.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to create a strategic planning from people that are coming and going, herding cats?
Different perspectives. So in my example of working with departments at Ohio State, and again, different colleges, not just our college, but over in engineering and others, imagine a group of faculty, tenured faculty, who have very distinct research lines and processes, and these are pretty smart people, independent thinkers. And some guy like me comes in and says, let's all be a team. Let's see if we can work together. That doesn't work.
Group hugs.
Let's take off our shoes and sing, No. Actually, I had a department chair tell me that once. She said, we really need to improve our teamwork and to bring people together, but we can't sing. I just laughed. I said, we won't do that. I said, but we will talk about your mission, and we'll ask people to come back to why they do what they do. That Simon Sinek, start with why. Because when people remember that, when we pause and remember why we went to all this trouble to get a degree or a couple of degrees and to teach, for in this example, at the university level, or to work in this particular field, it's usually we're driven by something internally. And when we can go back to that, then it's really easy to come together and to be more of a team and to improve your process, your outcome, your products, whatever it is you're trying to improve, your teaching.
It's interesting. I attended this one strategic planning group, and it was for the state of Ohio. It was for an organization. They had 4 pages, there were about 7 or 8 different bowling points. So about 50 different mission statements. and
it's hard to figure out what direction you're going with
that's
that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. It was very difficult to be able to give all of those.
There's a restaurant chain, and they own like Olive Garden, and I forget what all ones that they own. But their mission is like to nourish and delight all of our customers.
Plain and simple.
That's it. To nourish, good, and delight. Man, I mean that. From the CEO to a newest person who's cleaning in the restaurant can understand that that's the mission that we're trying to accomplish, and that will improve their bottom line. There's no question about it. You can get people aligned in that way.
And many times individuals look at that mission and statement and have to put everything that is involved in their whole world.
I had an organization that had a mission statement. I actually took it out of I extracted it from their website. It was 432 words long.
Wow.
Most are 20 or 30 or 40 words, which is too many. But it was 432 words.
Wow.
And when I told them that, when I was doing the facilitating for their group, they were like, what? Because I asked them, I said, who knows your mission statement? And there wasn't a word. Nobody said anything. I said, well, just tell me in your own words. I said, here's your mission statement. No wonder they didn't know it. And so getting back to that why.
That's right.
Yeah. And we simplified that greatly. And we didn't sing songs or have a group hug. But I'll tell you what, people left that meeting with some very clear priority items, kind of major themes and goals, and some actionable things, really low-hanging fruit, a few things that were longer term that will absolutely turn that organization. And they were together, and they were focused, and they were aligned. So that's the difference. And just taking the time, but you have to invest the time. And so that's where we are here on the logistics. I'll ask organizations, who participates? Do you just bring in your employees, or do you go externally and get your clients and customers to come, your partners? At Ohio State or in an academic organization, your faculty, your staff, your supervisors. How many people might be involved in this? How much time? I've had organizations that tell me, well, we only have 2 hours. I just laugh, It's like, well, you're not going to do a strategic plan then. How serious are you? You've got to put some time in this. But you can do truncated versions. You can do shorter versions. and compressed planning, and I can lead those as well.
Well, that brings up an interesting point. You know, time is money, but also someone leading that. So what's your recommendations on budgets, on external, internal people? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, so it depends on the organization. A lot of nonprofits don't have much budget to do strategic planning. And in fact, you've again jumped ahead of me, or you're tracking right with me, because my next question that I'll ask groups is, do you have funds to hire an external facilitator? Those can really range. I mean, maybe you can get somebody for $1,000, $2,000. A lot of times it's $5,000 to $10,000 if it's a really major organization statewide and you're doing environmental scans, internal and external. You could be talking $25,000. I've done those before, not me, but my department. Yeah. I don't get that money. Or you could call somebody like OSU Extension Community Development, because we have team members who, like me, facilitate these conversations. And so when it's public good versus private good, we kind of differentiate. If it's a for-profit company, of course, then we're going to charge some fees for that, some cost recovery, which makes sense. If it's a nonprofit or an educational institution or some state organization, local government, we may do it for just a very minimal, whatever our costs are, just because we have to get some of our funding, help cover our costs. But it can be very reasonable, and so that's an opportunity for people to holler at us versus going to the outside. I've worked with some organizations that have hired external facilitators and have not been real thrilled. There are some excellent ones out there. Some of those aren't tremendously expensive. Some of them are, and then there are also some poor ones out there.
Understand
that listening up front. If you're an organization thinking about strategic planning, let me just say this as we kind of wrap up here. Interview them as much as or listen to make sure they're interviewing you, and that they're listening to what you have to say, what your needs are, and what your objectives are. Because if they come in with their own idea of how to do a strategic plan, we can walk you through this, then it's going to be their strategic plan. So that would be my probably my highest recommendation if you're looking at bringing somebody in to do that kind of work. So
what you're saying is just because they wrote a book doesn't necessarily mean they can verbalize that book.
Yeah. Or that plan that they have a really nice outline for may not fit your organization or the objectives that you're trying to do. Because your nonprofit may have a slightly different bent, or your business, your small business or industry may have a slightly different objective. And so that's why you need to interview them. That's
very good. Really good material. I think I will go home to my wife and say, I want you to start doing a strategic plan.
Excellent.
Any final thoughts to the viewing audience regarding the strategic planning, things of that nature?
No, just to wrap up, do it. Get back to your mission, because that's the critical piece.
Yes, it is.
It can make all the difference in the world in your success and continuing as an organization.
Yes, that's very, very true. We're talking with Brian Raison, PhD in what?
Non-formal education research.
Okay, all right. Well, good. And if you want more information, at the bottom of the screen or at the end of the screen, etc., we'll have some contact information. Brian, it's always a pleasure being able to talk with you. And again, you are a faculty member at Ohio State University, and you teach this to people that are getting involved in the agricultural programs.
Yeah, our graduate programs.
Oh, okay,
yes.
All right.
Yep.
And we'd like for you to come back and talk about some of the other things that you're involved with, and really appreciate your being involved with this.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. For Dr. Brian Raison and Patrick Dengel, we thank you for viewing, and hope to see you soon.